All right. Are we ready? Well, welcome to all of you this morning. This is the IDT Roundtable for this morning, the first one of the spring semester, Digital Repositories. I'm Vicki Clegg. I'm the director of the Center for the Advancement of Teaching and Learning. And I wanted to spend just a couple of seconds to mention today that what we're trying to do over the next several roundtables is to offer sort of a combination of what are the roundtable events with Tech Bites, which some of you may be familiar with. Tech Bites are run at a different time and have a slightly different focus, more on the technology, whereas what we try to do here is focused a little bit more on teaching and learning. But we're trying to put those two together so that perhaps what they do in Tech Bites can follow on what we do. As I understand it, the next Tech Bite session will be February 19th. At 1:30, and there will be some information coming out on that one. That's about the use of Facebook in your teaching, so that one should be interesting, I think, as well. This morning, we're really happy to have two people with us from the Information Technology Assistance Center, Marty Courtois, who has quite a bit of information to share with you about KREX, and then Shalin, who is one of the instructional designers, will also talk a little bit more broadly about digital repositories. So with that, I'll turn it over to the two of you.
Okay, thanks, Vicki. Okay, good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Marty Courtois. I work with the K-State Research Exchange, and I'll need just a moment to get things set here. I've got a lot of stuff on my computer, and just need to balance things here. Okay, I think that's ready to go. Everyone can see the screen okay? Good. And if you've had a chance, for those folks who are here live, if you had a chance to pick up the KREX brochure on the table, please make sure to take that with you. So let me start by talking about KREX. And I'll need to switch this. Okay, so K-State Research Exchange is a service offered by the library, and the purpose is to collect digital copies of scholarly and creative work of faculty and students at K-State. So this might include journal articles, book chapters, theses, dissertations, other types of creative work. But the basic idea is that we would capture copies of that work in KREX and make those items freely available on the web. So today I'm going to show you how KREX works, show some examples of how to deposit items, and also talk about the benefits of doing this. It's really something that's very new in terms of publishing, and to show some of the benefits of that. And I need to start with defining a couple terms that I'm going to use throughout my talk. And the first one is institutional repository. So KREX is an institutional repository, and what we're trying to do is collect the scholarly and research output of K-State. Okay, and there are many institutional repositories, probably over 1,000 worldwide. So it is something, not just happening at K-State, but at academic institutions and research centers around the world. The focus is largely on scholarly and research output. Some repositories also collect maybe the administrative output of the campus or historical, archival type documents. But I think here we're really trying to emphasize more the creative work rather than the business of the campus. Another term I'll use a lot is self-archive, and that's the process of depositing your work in an institutional repository. I think that's going to be a big change for faculty to start to look at that as maybe part of the process of publishing. So self-archiving is that process. And finally, open access. When I use that term, I'm referring to work that's freely available on the web. So all items in KREX, you just click on it and you can get the full item. You don't get just an abstract or you don't get just keywords, but the actual item, and there's no charge for doing that. And many publishers are uncomfortable with that situation, or there's sort of a transition period from when things were not open access to now trying to make things open access. So it's really a time of trying to work out copyright issues and how we provide that access, and I'll say a little bit more about that as we go along. Okay, let's not read my email, but instead, okay, so let me start with just a quick overview of KREX, and this is the home page. In addition to searching by keyword, we can do searches, but the main arrangement is by department or college, seems to be the way that most units want to arrange that. So here, if we look under College of Human Ecology, under that we would show the 4 departments within that college, and the little number next to each one represents the number of items that are in that collection. Okay, so if we look under apparel, textiles, and interior design, here again we can search by keyword or browse by different parameters. If I look under date, we can see here are the items that have been submitted by faculty from that department. And if I click on the link here for the title, it brings me to a record for that item. So I've got the title, authors, the full citation information. Here, this was published in this journal, keywords, abstract. It also provides a URL for that item, so you can use this URL to link to, from a personal web page or a departmental web page. It also has a link to the actual article. So if I click on that, okay, and then I have the article appears here, full text of the article. Now, this doesn't look like the article from the journal, because what we need to do in this case with this particular publisher is provide the author's manuscript, the author's final revised manuscript, rather than the PDF file produced by the publisher. So same content as we scroll through here. Here's an abstract of the article. Here's the text of the article. Her tables and figures, I think, are here toward the end. So her tables are here. But the publisher doesn't allow us to use the actual publisher version. So we have to use the author's manuscript. So that's something we often need to negotiate with the publisher or make sure we understand the copyright agreement that was signed by the author when she submitted that article. And I'll say a little bit more about that along the way, but that's certainly a big part of depositing your work, is being aware of that copyright agreement. Okay, let me encourage you to ask questions as we go along. I know there's a big crowd here today, but we'll try to fit everybody's question in. So that's just a quick overview of KREX. But let me go into some of the benefits of depositing your work in a repository. And I think that'll be the bulk of my talk here. Okay. I think one of the benefits of self-archiving or putting your work in an institutional repository is that it's much more discoverable. So having your work in an IR means that more people will be able to find it, and hopefully your research or your work will have a greater impact as a result of that greater discoverability. So let me show a couple examples here. Here I'm looking in Google, and let's say if I have a situation where I'm reading an article and I come across a citation in the bibliography. I say, oh, here's this article, I want to look at that. Where's the first place I'm going to go to look for that? Some people might go to the library. I think a lot of people will go right to Google and try to find, can I find this article on the web? So here I've taken the first couple words from a title of an item in KREX, author's article, and when I search that in Google, the first item that comes up is from K-State Research Exchange, a link to that article. So if I follow this link, I go right back to KREX, and I'm able to get the full text of the article. when I look at some of the other references here, let's see. Here's one to Ingenta. So if I would follow that link, okay, so if someone clicked on this link, I've got the abstract, I've got the keywords. Oh, bad news, I'm going to have to pay $40 in order to read this article. So what's the likelihood of someone following this link? Pretty low. But if we can provide open access to the same content on KREX, I think then we're really helping to promote that author's work. So just to try to illustrate one example there of how KREX does very well in terms of showing up in Google searches. Let me give another example here. This is in Google Scholar. And how many people have used Google Scholar? Do you use this? A couple. Okay, good, good. So if you're looking for scholarly work or research type material, very good place to go. So here I've searched under Amish Veil, just the topic of one of the items in KREX. And again, it comes out pretty good. We're at the top of the list and a link back to KREX. So if I click on this title, it's going to take me right into KREX, for this item, and I'd be able to view the author's article that way. Another one, how many people have used Oyster? Heard about this? Okay, good, good. But I think this is really a fantastic resource. And what they do is index, basically they're indexing the work from institutional repositories. And there are over 1,000 IRs that they survey and have over 20 million records in here. So if you think about it, no one's going to find our little KREX site on the web. Certainly you can come to KREX and do a keyword search, but people aren't going to know about that worldwide. What Oyster provides is that worldwide access. So they're indexing all of the repositories worldwide like KREX, so you can come to one source and find information that way. So here, let's see if I still have this. No, okay, I'm going to have to enter this again. So one of the faculty who submitted his work, oops. Okay, is John Murray, and he did a lot of work on sort of the effects of television on children. So if I do a search, let's see, I want to change this to author. Okay. So when I'm searching here, I'm searching across over 1,000 different repositories through Oyster. Okay, and so the results I get here, it shows that it found 6 items, and these come from several different repositories. One, Defense Technical Information Center, 3 from KREX, another one from Brigham Young University. So what I get here then is the, let me just scroll down here. Okay, is the full information about that. So I've got the authors, the abstract, note about it. We had to add a copyright statement from the publisher. But I have the link that, again, would take me right back to KREX. So KREX will provide the full text of the item, but we can use tools like Google and Google Scholar and Oyster in order to find what's in KREX. Okay? So I think having these kind of tools available really make work in KREX much more discoverable. And I think really that's the main thing. Let me also show back in KREX, we have a link here for statistics. And over the last couple months, we've figured out a way to try to track the number of times that items are viewed in KREX. So for example, if I go here looking at the statistics for October, so just during that 1 month, this student's thesis on Facebook was viewed over 300 times just during that month. So like 10 times a day, someone was looking at this student's work through KREX. On this carcass disposal, a big study done by the National Agricultural Biosecurity Center, about 100 downloads during that month. So items in KREX do get used, and I think just having them available for searching through the big web search engines really helped increase that impact. Okay, any questions so far? Yes.
So for something to go into Oyster, is there a certain type of metadata that has to be collected so it's captured on the federated search?
Yes, it needs to be, the items surveyed by Oyster, indexed by Oyster, have to be built on a particular standard, Open Archives Initiative. So that's not something you can do on a regular web page. It has to be built in a database and built to those specific standards. Another reason why it's good to put your work in KREX rather than just link to it from your web page, because that will not show up in Oyster. So, and I'll say a little more about that. Yeah, good question. Okay. Okay. The other thing I want to talk about in terms of increasing impact is that items that are available open access on the web tend to be cited much more than items that are available only in subscription. So for example, this is results from a study. It's kind of hard to read this chart, so I'm going to walk through it a little bit. But this was a study done in the UK. They surveyed over 1 million articles, published in scholarly journals, published over a 10-year time period. And they looked at, of those 1 million articles, how many were available open access as opposed to only by subscription, and how did those citation rates compare. And what they found, they looked at about 10 or 12 different subject areas, and those are listed across the bottom here. So in biology, for example, they found that those articles that were available open access were cited 36% more than articles that weren't open access. In an area like sociology, it was over 100% greater citations for open access articles. So if you're concerned about the impact of your work, certainly you want people to read it and to use it in their work and to try to build on it. Having your work available open access is going to increase the citation rate. So that is a good thing. And I think this is a very dramatic example for how pervasive that effect can be. Okay, any questions on that? I know this author is very intense who put this together, and his charts tend to be very intense, so it might be kind of hard to see that. Okay. Another item I want to show here, again in terms of access, and this is sort of a sad story. And again, let me explain this just because there's a lot going on here. But here we're looking at monograph and serial expenditures in ARL libraries. So what the biggest libraries in the U.S. spent on books and journals over almost a 20-year time period. So during that time period, 1986 through 2004, the consumer price index rose 73%. So that's sort of our baseline inflation. But up at the very top, it might be hard to see, for serial expenditures, that is what libraries spent on journals, rose almost 300%. So basically for that time period, publishers raised prices and raised prices and raised prices. As a consequence, libraries could purchase, this line here represents the serials purchased, stays flat for 15 years. We just couldn't buy journals. It was cancel, cancel, cancel. And the individual unit cost for serials rose almost 200%. So consumer price index went up 73%. The cost of journal subscriptions rose 200%. So basically, after 20 years of this, we're in a situation where libraries can provide less access to more and more information. More information is being produced. We're able to provide less of it through the library. So something like open access and institutional repositories gives us a way to try to recover some of that ground, to provide access that we've lost through these outrageous price increases. Okay, I mentioned earlier that every item in KREX has a permanent URL. It's a very compact URL. You can use that URL if you want to link to an item from any web page. But we do need to be careful about some aspects of copyright. And let me show an example here. So here we're looking at a faculty member's homepage, and I picked out this one, but I have a dozen examples of this, so I don't mean to pick on this one person. And here she has a list of her publications on a web page, good thing to do. And here's a particular link to one, and it might be kind of hard to see on the screen, but here's a link under that title. So if I follow that link, it leads to the actual published article. Hey, great, it's open access. I can read the whole thing, not pay $40 to read this. This is terrific. But we know that this publisher, Elsevier, doesn't allow you to do this. Here she's used the actual formatted PDF article from that publisher. But if we look at a few things here, let me get back. Okay, here's the statement of the copyright agreement from Elsevier, the publisher of that journal. And it says you have the right to post a revised personal version of the text of the final journal article. So you have to use your manuscript rather than the publisher's formatted version. Elsevier makes this even clearer under, when they send out that review copy, they're now putting this little cover on it. It says clearly that posting to a personal, institutional, or third-party website is prohibited. So basically, this faculty member, by linking to that article, by providing a copy of that PDF, is in violation of the publishing agreement that she signed when she published that. And I think we need to be very careful here. And there are, I'm aware of dozens of violations of this on campus. But the one thing we can do when working in KREX is make sure that we comply with the copyright agreement that you've signed with the publisher. In many cases, we need to use your manuscript rather than the publisher's formatted version. Some publishers allow us to do that, but basically they say, the formatted version is our work, the actual idea, the manuscript is your work, but you can't use our formatted version. So just something we need to be very careful about. Okay. I think one other benefit of putting your work into KREX is just the comprehensiveness. If you do this on a departmental level, it gives you the ability to point to KREX and say, here's the work that this department does. And KREX is still very new. We haven't been able to build up a lot of collections yet. But if we take a look here under Food Science Institute, and if I just browse by date, and here we're able to look at a pretty significant portion of work done by that research center. Going back even 20 years, we start to get a good idea of what this unit does. So they're able to point to this in terms of prospective students, new faculty, maybe for funding. This is what we do. Go to this site. You can see what our researchers have done. You can read the actual paper. And I think there's a benefit to having that, a collection of the work of that unit. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. If something comes up, I need to look a lot at the screen here, so just holler if you have a question. But let me show. Okay. I wanted to talk a little bit about the actual process of getting your work into KREX. And probably the first thing you would need to do is give me a call. My name and number and email are on the brochure, and we would need to do a little bit of programming in order to set up a collection. And we'd want to talk about, what would be an appropriate scope for that collection. Would you want to set up something for your entire department or a college or a research center? So we would have a short discussion, and I'd have to do a little bit of work with the programmers in order to set up that collection. Usually doesn't take more than a day or two. At that point, we would authorize you and anyone else in your department who's interested in doing this, and you'd be able to log into KREX with your EID and password, and you'd come to a screen like this where you can start to submit your item. And so it's just fill in the blanks, authors, EID, title. If you can give us even just a rough citation to the item, if it was published in a book or conference proceedings or article, anything else we need to know about it. It's really very informal. Put in some keywords. These are very important in terms of exposing the data in the right way to Google and Google Scholar. It's very helpful to have the keywords. Paste in an abstract. Go on to the next page and attach the actual file. In most cases, it's best to start by giving us the final manuscript, and that's pretty much it. Just those two steps. What would happen then is this would be received by the library. It doesn't immediately go into KREX, but it's received by the library. We'll check through that very carefully. We'll check the publisher's copyright agreement. If we can use their PDF, great. We'll get back in touch with you and see if you have that file. If not, we'll use the manuscript. And if we need to include any specific copyright statements or links that publisher requires, we'll be sure to add that. So we're very careful to make sure that we comply with the copyright agreement from that publisher. And that might take from a day to, I've had some go on for weeks, although I probably shouldn't say that, as we've tried to negotiate with the publisher. So in most cases, 1 or 2 days before that's available in KREX. So, any other questions on this? Yes, Phyllis. I, of course, think there are no negatives to using KREX, but some of those that I've heard expressed to me by others, I think some faculty are reluctant to put their manuscript on the web. And the reasons I've heard, it's not the final published version. It's not the exact, it's not formatted exactly the same way as the item that was put out by the publisher. And I can understand that concern. And I think some faculty have mentioned, too, that even once they send the publisher that final reviewed, revised manuscript, the editor might make some changes, probably pretty small at that stage. But so there may not be 100% agreement between the publisher version and that final manuscript. So I think that's that's one item I hear that might be reluctant. Also, I think another thing I've heard mostly from the humanities, and specifically from, I hear this a lot from creative writing programs at different universities, where students or faculty are writing fiction, short stories, poetry, and they'll want to have these published by commercial publishers. That's their livelihood. If they put that sort of work in an institutional repository, again, I think this is sort of misguided, but the publishers seem to be saying, oh, if your work is available online, we're not even going to look at it, to publish it. And so I think those students and faculty are very reluctant to put their items in an IR if it's going to cut off their ability to have it published. But I think I tend to see it more as free publicity. If I can walk into a publisher and show them, here, I have 3 short stories on the web, and they've been downloaded 1,000 times, or a day or whatever. People read my stuff. I'm mentioned on blogs. I show up on wikis. Come on, I'm a good investment. My stuff, people are interested. So I'm not sure I understand that, that maybe they're just missing an opportunity. And I think a lot of this is new, and it's new ways of looking at publishing. So, and those are some of the arguments I hear.
So is that how publishers then reconcile the fact that you're putting it in their journal, but you're also putting it online? Because it just seems like publishers would be really, well, if you're going to if you're going to let us publish it, then we don't want it to be anyplace else. Are there some publishers that say that?
Yes. Yes, they do. And I think it's very much a transition period. Some publishers are very much against this. Some, in fact, there's sort of an open access publishing movement where journals will say, when we publish an item, we're going to make it open access. You don't have to subscribe to it. We'll collect that money some other way, through maybe charging authors fees in order to publish in the journal. And there are quite a few journals that are taking that kind of business model. Rather than charging subscriptions, they get their operating costs through another means. And again, I think some faculty are reluctant to do that. Most of these journals tend to be very new, and if for tenure and promotion, if you need to publish in a well-known established journal, you might not be able to find an open access journal that it is has as much clout as a journal that's been around for 100 years or so. But again, very much in transition, and I think the main thing to keep in mind with KREX is that it's not a substitute for publishing. It's really, it doesn't replace peer review. It doesn't replace publishing in traditional sources. But it can be used to supplement that and hopefully increase the impact of your work. Yes?
NIH requires that it's open access now. Publishers, at least in my experience, make you pay for that to happen.
Yeah, boy, that whole NIH thing was.
Authors pay to allow that to be open access unless you have a repository like this that you can put it into. It's in the wording. I think it's changing now, but I think that's a requirement now.
Yeah, some publishers do say that for a fee, and generally it's in the thousands of dollars, we'll make this open access. But read your copyright agreement very carefully, and in most cases, I want to say in all cases, at least for the agreements I've read, you have the option, you have the right to make it open access on your own, through an institutional repository. If you want a publisher like Springer to make it open access through their site, yes, then you have to pay them. But you also have the right to do that on your own at no cost. But read that agreement carefully. And I know that's hard to do. It's a lot of fine print, and it's hard to take time out of your day to study that. But read that carefully before you sign it. Because generally I would say you never have to pay that fee in order to make it open access. I think publishers are trying to position themselves so they can continue to make money as things transition more to open access, but you're not required to pay that. Yeah, and then Shalin, yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned students posting their thesis or their dissertation. If we wanted to post our thesis or dissertation and we got that from another school, would we be able to do that in this depository, or would we contact the school that we graduated from and see if they had that kind of program available?
Good question. And probably, was it fairly recently that you submitted that? Last 2 or 3 years?
2005 on my dissertation.com.
Okay. Maybe we could probably go either way. You could probably contact your home institution and find out if they're in the process of taking dissertations that were submitted in paper, which I assume you did, and if they're trying to convert those to digital format. And if so, they would love to hear from you and have you give them permission to do that. If not, one thing we could look at is setting up a collection in KREX for your department. Is that something we'd want to try to do on a wider basis? Maybe collect, go back and collect dissertations turned in by students in your department. So yeah, I think we could could approach that either way. But we probably want to, in terms of KREX, we'd want to talk about maybe not just your dissertation, but does it make sense to try to collect other dissertations as well? So.
One other question of formatting. I think the author was to do formatting to make their document look similar to the journal article, maybe a little bit easier to read than just the normal Word document. Is that something that would be allowed?
Yes, although I would caution you, don't make it look too much like the publisher's version, just so it doesn't, draw attention. But yeah, I've heard people talk about, reverse engineering, so it looks exactly like it, but be able to say, no, I didn't use your PDF, but I think that's not the right, that's not in the spirit of this. So, but yeah, I think you could certainly make adjustments to that manuscript. Yeah, Shalin?
How do departments and colleges establish quality? So when someone submits something, if it seems subpar, who jumps in to say, hey, wait? Or does it have to be approved by the department first? Or how do you proceed? Because that seems like dangerous waters, but.
Yeah, it's a good question that really hasn't come up yet, but the one thing we're able to do within KREX is set up collection administrators. So for example, if a department wanted to have sort of a final review of items that are submitted, we could designate any number of people in that department, for example, who could review those submissions, before they're actually archived in KREX. They would be able to look through those and approve or reject items. And if something isn't up to par, they would, hopefully be able to negotiate with the submitter and, figure out what needs to be changed, that way. So yes, departments can have a review in that if they want. Okay, if there are no other questions, I want to thank you. And if you have further questions about KREX or would like to talk to me about that or look into getting your work into KREX, please give me a call or send me an email, and I'd be glad to sit down with you or meet with your department and talk some more about that. But now we're going to switch over to Shalin, and we'll need to switch some of our connections here. Oh, when I'm supposed to keep talking? Well, I think it's usually Alt, F8.
Oh, there it goes. Thanks.
Did you need your display too?
And I do it again, right?
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, mine's only going to be hopefully about 10 minutes. And so maybe if we could start with maybe why you all came and some things you're interested in, because I actually just have a couple slides. And was there a particular interest or? Yes.
It's really hard to find repositories. I didn't know if you had any advice on, I'm more biological, I'm a nutrition, but I don't think nutrition repositories exist, per se. outside and not showing food and things, that doesn't help me. You know, I need like anatomy and physiology and things. So I've done a lot of making my own figures, and you know, Wikipedia has, you know, I can use that public domain material. So that's what I'm interested in, is finding and then maybe even creating a repository of what I have.
And I think Marty can talk a bit about the technologies in terms of the back end. I think they use DSpace out of MIT, which is an open source system that helps them organize and share information. But there's actually a backstory. Can I share a little bit about your and my conversations? So is it Linshield? Okay, so Dr. Linshield he's trying to go without a textbook, and he's trying to create a nutrition textbook himself of cobbled materials from various resources. And I was saying, you know, there's open source materials, there's stuff we can find. And we were in his office and we tracked back an image that he thought would, let's say, how about if we track this one? We were trying to find out who actually owned it. And we found it on like 3 or 4 different sites by doing image searches, never got an original name on it, never figured out who created it or who owns it, and hit a dead end. And then he went to the library and talked to a very nice librarian who disagreed with me about copyright and what he could and couldn't use because we have a different point of view. And then that librarian and I put our heads together, and we were trying to have an understanding of what the TEACH Act involved and some other pieces of that. And I think we left him hanging. I think the last thing was she was going to email you back, and I hope she has.
Yeah, but
Okay.
I think it's like you said, it seems like it's open to manipulation. So, but the vast majority of things you're not supposed to use is basically what it comes down to.
Yeah. Well, and I think I would agree with that a majority of the contents that you find out in the world are assumed to be copyrighted and are not, you know, open source. They're not for free use unless it's explicitly said to be. So, and I've had similar experiences with a couple other faculty in different fields where you're looking for open source, you know, publicly released materials that you can use legally, even if you went commercial. I mean, that would be the ultimate, right? That means your courses are not just covered under fair use. And so those are some challenges, you know, and I was going to ask Marty about this, about what, just because it's open means people can read it, but it doesn't mean release of copyright either. It just means people can read it.
Right, there is a big difference between open access, you know, being able to sit down and read an item, and the copyright clearance to be able to reuse that work. So they're not the same thing. Just because something is freely available on the web doesn't mean you can take that work and incorporate it into yours. You know, so in most cases, like Shalin said, you'll need to get, you know, permission in order to reuse that work.
Okay, let me open up the question again. Yes, please.
And this may be such a basic question, because this is something that's really, really new to me. If you link to, or give the students a link to that information, is that acceptable?
I would say yes. Generally, if you're just, you know, linking to that source, you know, no problem. But if you try to take something from that source and incorporate it into your work, you know, if you're borrowing an image or a paragraph or, you know, something else from that site, then that's much different.
How am I going to give links to lots of different particular tools? And even in class, if I link to a YouTube video from my PowerPoint, am I
You can
saying
embed
that?
YouTube. They have embedders and wikis, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I embed it.
Okay. Any others? Okay. Then I'll just do my quick presentation here. This is about submitting to digital learning repositories and a little bit about copyright releases. But I think, as was clear in the interchange that we have had here, look at repositories as places not only to archive your work, but also as a resource for your teaching, that there's a lot there for you. There's like no heat in this room, is there? I have never, You don't know what's going on? It looks like it should be okay? Okay. It's just I've never been this cold in this room before. Okay, so the rationales behind why to publish in a digital repository. One is to share research and academic work through wider distribution channels, which Marty mentioned. You want to access the work of colleagues and others for academic and research purposes. Learn new methods for teaching and learning online. Offer more open source learning resources for students so that you can send students to links. And also raise the university profile in public. And I think Marty probably hit on most of those, if not all of them. There are some digital learning repositories and repositories. Let me see if I can lower this a little bit. Oh, maybe is it going the wrong way? Anyway, a repository is a repository of pointers to permanent, hopefully permanent, semi-permanent links to different resources on the web on different people's servers. Okay, so a repository would be something like Merlot is a repository. It doesn't actually host the digital contents on their own servers. They just go ahead and point, and then they also have tools to be able to tell if a link is broken or if resources have been taken offline. And repositories also grab, thank you, Marty, also grab contents or metadata about the resource. So it'll say this resource is for 5th graders to 7th graders, and it's written in Spanish, and it involves these technologies, and this is the use, and here are some teaching notes. Okay? And then there are some others here. The National Science Digital Library is very well known, and some others. And here's some screenshots from them. And then, of course, we have a lot of university-based digital repositories at Cornell and various other universities. Some very famous ones, the Wisconsin Online Resource Center, Campus Alberta, and some others. There are also subject-based digital repositories. So different fields may have 2 or 3 very dominant ones. It does take, I think, a lot of human talent, a lot of technology, a lot of goodwill, and a lot of resources to bring subject-based repositories together. So usually, if you have specialization at a university, that's generally where, where they're going to start building their repositories in terms of specific information. There are repositories of video, of 3D interactive simulations, things that are extremely heavy duty in terms of how much memory is required. There are repositories of maps, satellite maps, and others that are huge in terms of the amounts of data that they require, and many of them actually are not really that accessible on a desktop. For some of them, you'll have to use more powerful machines to access some of them. These are pretty open source common ones. Basically, anything digital you can archive in repositories. And you can find repositories for all types of stuff, and they're usually mixed media. So you have some that include articles, some that have audio, some that have video, and different mixes. Just from a quick overview, you can have human-based vetting, which in part Marty says some departments and colleges use. There are others that are purely machine-based, where people self-submit, they self-select themselves in, and then users within that repository may come and evaluate the resources and say yay, nay, or drop this or whatever. But generally, you find that there will be some requirements for metadata or data about data, labeling, so people know what it is you've submitted. And I've been reading about not only single metadata models that are applied, but that there are various repositories that collect information that makes it possible to look at that object using 2 or 3 different types of metadata labeling methods, so that if you do if there are federated searches that go to different repositories to look for information, it can read your data in a number of different ways. So if people are more comfortable understanding something, this set of data about your digital objects, they can actually cull that from by the way you submitted it. I hope that made sense. If it doesn't, you can just start going like this, and then I'll just say, okay, I'll try that again or something. And there are learning objects for those of you who teach online. We are the instructional designers at ITAC, and so we help instructors teach online, and we do honestly do our serious best to try to find resources pretty tenaciously. But there are some where I failed. But there are various types of learning object collections that you can go to, and different ways that they are labeled. But these are different labeling systems for the metadata, and there are others, I'm positive, because this is not that I don't know as well. As I've been looking at different repositories and using them, there are very creative searches to get information. So right now we're used to using text to find materials. But as you and I know, language is very malleable. It's quite inaccurate. I may mean something but express something else totally different. So text isn't quite exactly what is the most effective, especially if you are looking at repositories of videos, repositories of images and drawings, certain moods you want to capture. And so there are other search methods, if you read the literature, to find images by drawing an image. So I want an image that looks kind of like this. I remember in my mind's eye what it looked like, and then you can actually draw into the computer and have it look for that, or look for certain color tones and identify certain faces and that sort of thing. So there are different ways that you can interact with the content of a repository. There are also audio ways, voice annotation, especially for news reels, for news video and that sort of thing, where they have machine capture of the transcript, and then you can try to find voice that deals with a particular name or pronunciation. There are different ways to search. And then combinations of text and images to do searches. The way the information is distributed, there are some that are free. There are others that are subscription-based. There are some where you can download the materials. You could have a web-based system. There are closed repository systems for companies, for example. I think Cisco Systems and Microsoft, and I think, those are the two that I know that have such repositories of objects that people can get to. And generally, repositories have archival functions, so they protect the work that they take in. So whatever they ingest, they will update to newer technological versions, and Marty says that's also part of KREX. They maintain the metadata. They make sure that the repository is available, either publicly, purely publicly, semi-publicly, or in a closed, protected, dim, dark repository. The content they try to make sure is portable, meaning you can take it off and upload it into another space to use it, and that it's generally accessible. Security issues are also part of digital repositories, where they make sure that the data has its integrity, that it's correct, and that there's not accidental or malicious altering of the dissertation or the articles or the recordings. There are issues also of maintaining user privacy. So the idea is, if you go into a repository, for some of you, if you go to a library and you go into some of K-State's repositories and you download an article, it'll say downloaded at K-State at this time on this day. Have you seen that, where it includes that text on the side? And there's arguments that people should be able to access whatever they want and not be tracked, or have that be known where it was downloaded and that sort of thing. Part of the I'm going to not go into the finer points of that, but just some interesting discussions. And other security, another security issue is that if a file is versioned, you don't see this as much in repositories where a certain object evolves over time. So maybe another version, users who look at this and they build on a particular work or derive a work from it. Then version 1, version 2, let's say a director's cut versus the public cut of a film. So being able to version very accurately, what version a file is in. And then controlling what's called the downstream use. A downstream use just means once something is downloaded and it's out in the world, there's very little you can do once information is out in the world. Information wants to be free, right? And so the question is, if you have certain types of content, how do you control it once it's downstream? Do you, go ahead and label all your objects, with some sort of watermarking or some other mark in order to see where it goes and how it's used? I mean, do you make it have a deadline where it stops working, which people do as part of digital rights management? So the question is, how do you control for downstream? And then there's now, the most recent thing that they're doing now is they're adding wikis, blogs, individual accounts, and shared collaborative workspaces in some digital repositories. I think the National Science Digital Library added like a blog recently, or a wiki. And the idea is that you're starting to create community around information. So there's some pushing in that direction. Because the idea is that if you attract different types of users, they're going to come at your material, and maybe their research or their thinking is going to add value to the information you have or the digital content you have. So a quick look at intellectual property and digital repositories. And my supervisor said, tell them you're not a copyright expert. I'm not a copyright expert. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a person I'm an instructional designer who has some interest in this field. So, if you take anything that I say, just take it as general information, not advisement. And whatever you do, if you're doing it at your own risk, I'm not telling you to do anything. So anyway, just a very quick overview, just a couple slides. The big name in this business here now is Creative Commons. Lawrence Lessig, the lawyer, created Creative Commons, and the idea is that you can release the contents that you create using different licensing conditions that releases some of your hold on what you create. And attribution, if you just say attribution, it means you release the right of copying, distributing, displaying, and performing the copyrighted work and any derivative works, as long as you give credit to the original creator of the work. So that's extremely, extremely generous release. And that's the most open. And so you've got the little Creative Commons thing, and then you've got the person, which is saying, hey, give me attribution, say who did it. Attribution share alike is where you release the distribution of derivative works under a license similar to the license governing the author's work, where you have to just do attribution. So it's like open source software licenses. So the idea is that you can't, if the first work was non-commercial, you have to share whatever the level of whatever you create at the same copyright level as the original work. If the original work was totally open to commercial use, whatever you derive from it has to be open to commercial use. Is that clear? If the first creation was non-commercial use, whatever you derive from the original work has to be non-commercial, and so on. So they have these different ones, and the most restrictive one is attribution, non-commercial, no derivatives. That means if you're going to use it, you can download it and share it, but you can't change the original work at all. You have to say where it came from. You cannot go commercial, right? So that's quite restrictive. And oftentimes you find whole repositories that apply these across the board. So every object that you submit is under whatever copyright release that repository uses. So that's something good to be aware of. And there are just some links, and this is going to be put on the IDTRoundtable website, this slideshow, so you can hit any of these links. But repositories are not for some things. This is like almost the last slide, I think. It's not for anything dealing with research and development, anything that has potential commercial value, of course. It's not if you have to share IP, If you're co-creating intellectual property with the university, you can't just release your side of it. It's not that way. You've got to have agreement. If you've got co-authors, if you've got co-developers, they have to be on board. If your stuff, you need to, as Marty said, read the fine point regarding journals to make sure that you follow the guidelines of the journal if you sign the contract, or you have to add addendums to the contract if you want to have some release of rights. Many formal conferences also will not allow sign over of rights of certain materials. So if you're going to do formal presentations, you also need to read the fine print, because many conferences want the rights to what you are going to present. K-State is working on clarifications, and a point person who will handle copyright issues is what I'm hearing. And here are some links that deal with IP at K-State. So legal counsel, K-State IP policy, academic personnel links. So all questions regarding copyright need to be reviewed on a case-by-case basis, and then the disclaimer. So are there any comments or questions? Yes?
So if I wanted to release what I've done in the public domain, how do I do that?
To release something in the public domain, I think you just generally need a very small line that just says this is released into the public domain. And anything in the public domain is like the most lenient release ever. So any copyright and any use that anyone ever wants to do, whether or not they want to give you attribution, yeah. So you're giving over everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
But anybody who's gone through doing this, even the Creative Commons, they ask for attribution and stuff like that. It's a huge pain.
Oh.
Because you've got to attribute every single thing you're finding. It's like, did you really need? Why do you care so much about getting the attribution? Really, honestly.
And that's actually a very, very good point. So, but then if you create an image, you don't want people to say, hey, it comes back to you, and you as an instructor or as a professor at K-State.
If you're doing a good job, it'll come back anyway. Whether you have them cite you or not, they'll eventually figure out, where it came from. And things change fast, so I'm hoping other people will be open to that, and I can use some of their stuff instead of having all the copyright laws and us having to think about all this. I guess it was.
Okay. So how would you feel if you created an image that took a long time to create and a lot of thought and a lot of all your work and your years of work, and I put it on my slideshow and I didn't attribute it, and I stood here and got the glory?
I think I would be helping the greater good.
Okay. Should we applaud him?
In a case like that, it might help someone who comes across that image and says, oh, can I use this in my work? And if even the most open Creative Commons attribute is on there, I forget what that's called, but it's basically, you can do anything you want with this and you don't have to give me any credit. At least it's clear to the next person, or someone looking at that, oh, I can take this, I don't have to try to find out who created it or, go through all that hassle.
No, I just want to be able to take it, and if they can change it and make it better, that's great. And then I want to use the better version, so that's what.
What if they make it worse? What if they take it and they put in misinformation?
I still got the better one.
Okay. So you're pretty, okay, I've never heard that before. And I just wonder if it works, if you back out in a systems view and you look at human behaviors, how people will actually respond. And yeah, and I'm a cynic. I own up to being a cynic. So. Okay, any comments or questions?
I kind of agree with them. I think that's where we're going with cookies and that kind of thing, is collaboration.
That's what, if everybody contributes a little, we'll have really good free content. You know what I mean? But if everybody has to attribute and all this kind of stuff, it's going to totally bind up the system because it takes too long to do that stuff.
Where do you put it all?
Well, or, if you have to ask for permission to use it, it's like, I don't have time to ask for permission to use every, thing I'm going to use and, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, but then let's say you write a paper and I want to track one of your sources. And let's say you cited Janelle and I needed to know something from Janelle. And if you don't cite, then I would be in a bind if I were trying to track back some of your thinking on a paper. And let's say I really needed something that you didn't quite address in your summary, but then I know Janelle did in her paper. And so if you cite, it leaves a trail, and that's part of the rationale about why it helps to have attribution. And then people are ego-driven oftentimes, and so the idea is if they can slap their name on it, they will. And it's I think for a lot of work, it's probably better not to have their name slapped on it. It's like digital graffiti. But you know, for a lot of projects, I also know people like their names and some credit.
And for every image you get at, you have to read the stupid copyright. And, you know, whether it's Creative Commons or whatever, you have to go through and read and say, well, can I use this? And what do I need to attribute? You know, what level of Creative Commons is it? And it's like, come on.
Yeah. No. Well, and I understand it's a bit of a headache, but yeah. And so we're in a world with these multiple parallel systems running at the same time. So, okay. Shashti, did you want to make an announcement or?
Are you done?
I don't know. I mean, I think are we done, Marty? Okay.
Well, thank you very much, for the presentation. And I would just like to say that the next presentation is on Second Life, and it's on February 26th, same room, same time. If you haven't had a chance, you can pick up the flyer on your way out. So I hope to see you all here. I think it'll be exciting. I mean, we've got a lot of topics lined up this semester that's, you know, cutting edge, but we're also like faculty from K-State are participating, and if you come to the presentation, you get to learn more about it. So, thank you. Yeah, thank you for